There is a very specific, unforgivable stench that permeates a kitchen when a gallon of whole milk is left at room temperature for 8 hours. It hits the olfactory nerves like a physical blow, a sour, coagulated warning that civilization in your apartment has completely collapsed. I stood in the center of our galley kitchen at 7 in the morning, staring at the source of this biological hazard. The refrigerator door hung open, not wide open, just cracked about 3 inches, the exact, infuriating measurement of pure apathy. A puddle of lukewarm condensation had pooled on the cracked linoleum, creeping toward my bare feet. Inside the glowing white plastic cavity, an entire ecosystem of expensive groceries was quietly expiring. The spinach had wilted into dark, gelatinous slime. The sharp cheddar was sweating a greasy residue, and the milk, my premium, non-homogenized, organic milk, had transformed into a foul-smelling chemistry experiment. This was not an isolated incident. This was the Tuesday morning ritual courtesy of my roommate Thatcher. Thatcher possessed a unique, maddening habit. Around 2 in the morning, his biological clock demanded sustenance. He would shamble out of his bedroom, navigate the dark hallway, and pry open the refrigerator. He wouldn't actually prepare anything. He would simply stand there, bathed in the artificial halogen glow, staring blankly at the shelves as if expecting a fully roasted turkey to magically materialize between the leftover takeout containers and the condiments. Eventually, he would give up, grab a single mozzarella cheese stick, peel it apart like a savage, and wander back to bed. The fatal flaw in his routine was the dismount. He never pushed the heavy metal door with enough force to engage the magnetic seal. He just gave it a lazy, apathetic flick of the wrist. I cleaned up the puddle, dumped the spoiled dairy down the sink, and threw away $15 worth of compromised produce. When Thatcher finally emerged from his room 4 hours later, scratching his jaw and looking entirely too well-rested, I confronted him. I kept my tone level, reasonable, and diplomatic. I explained the mechanics of a vacuum seal. I explained the financial toll of replacing ruined food twice a week. He leaned against the counter, chewing on a dry piece of toast, offering a half shrug. "My bad, man, the hinges must be stiff." "It bounces back." The hinges were not stiff. It did not bounce back. It required deliberate applied force to close, a concept apparently too complex for a man who primarily subsisted on string cheese and apathy. Asking nicely had achieved nothing. Rational adult communication was a dead end. If I wanted to save my groceries, I needed to bypass his logic and appeal directly to his primal, reptilian brain. I needed to implement a system of aggressive operant conditioning. I sat at my laptop that evening, scrolling through the deep, unregulated corners of wholesale internet marketplaces. I bypassed the standard domestic retailers and ventured into the wild west of international bulk shipping. I wasn't looking for a high-tech smart fridge alarm. Those were too expensive, too easily disabled, and far too pleasant. They emitted gentle, melodic chimes. I didn't want gentle. I wanted psychological warfare. After an hour of digging through pages of poorly translated product descriptions, I found my weapon. They were marketed as joyful sound light-censored refrigerator animal magnets. The vendor, located somewhere deep in an industrial park in Shenzhen, was selling them by the pound. The listing featured low-resolution images of cheap, garishly painted plastic shapes. Neon green frogs with bulging, asymmetrical eyes, bloated strawberries sporting terrifying, painted-on smiles, and macaws rendered in a shade of red so aggressive it hurt to look at. Their sole function was to detect sudden changes in light and emit a programmed tune. I didn't order one. I ordered 30. The package arrived 9 days later in a battered cardboard box wrapped in excessive layers of yellow shipping tape. I took it into my bedroom, locked the door, and sliced the tape open with a pocket knife. A wave of chemical-smelling plastic wafted up from the pile of auditory shrapnel. I picked up one of the terrifying strawberries, covered the tiny photo sensor on its forehead with my thumb, and carried it into my dark closet. I waited 3 seconds, then removed my thumb, exposing it to the sliver of light bleeding under the door. The sound it produced was astonishing. It was a shrill, piercing 8-bit rendition of Pop Goes the Weasel, completely lacking in bass or mid-range, consisting entirely of harsh, ear-bleeding treble. The tiny internal speaker cracked and buzzed with the strain of its own volume. It was the musical equivalent of chewing on tinfoil. I smiled in the darkness. It was perfect. I waited for Friday. Thatcher worked the closing shift at a local bar on weekends, meaning he wouldn't stumble through the front door until well past 1 in the morning. At midnight, I carried the box of plastic horrors into the kitchen. The apartment was dead quiet, save for the low hum of the refrigerator compressor. I pulled open the door, letting the cool air wash over me, and went to work. I was meticulous. I didn't just stick them to the smooth, visible expanse of the inner door. That would be too obvious. I wanted an immersive, inescapable experience. I took a piece of double-sided mounting tape and secured a neon frog to the underside of the top shelf, angling the sensor directly toward the internal light bulb. I wedged a terrifying, smiling strawberry between the ketchup and mustard bottles in the condiment rack. I hid a red macaw behind a jar of artisan pickles. I lined the ceiling of the fridge cavity with them. I attached 3 to the outer rim of the crisper drawer, perfectly positioned to catch the glare. For my masterpiece, I opened the cardboard egg carton. We had exactly 2 eggs left. I nestled a plastic frog into one of the empty dimples, right in the center, ensuring the light would hit it the second the carton was flipped open. By the time I finished, 29 light-activated noisemakers were strategically deployed throughout the appliance, armed and waiting in the absolute darkness of the closed fridge. The 30th magnet, a particularly deranged-looking parrot, I kept in my pocket. I pushed the heavy door shut, applying firm pressure until I heard the satisfying, airtight click of the magnetic seal catching. I retreated to my bedroom, leaving my door open just a crack. I turned off my lamp, sat in my desk chair, and waited. The waiting was the hardest part. The silence of the apartment seemed to amplify every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren from the city streets below. At 1:42 a.m., I heard the heavy clunk of the front door deadbolt turning. The hinges groaned, followed by the soft, shuffling thud of Thatcher's boots hitting the entryway mat. He didn't turn on the hallway light. He never did. He moved through the apartment guided only by muscle memory and the faint, ambient glow filtering through the blinds from the street lamps outside. I heard him walk past my door, his footsteps heavy and dragging. The floorboards in the kitchen squeaked, the exact spot right in front of the refrigerator. I held my breath, gripping the armrests of my chair. First came the sound of the handle engaging. Then the wet sucking sound of the airtight seal breaking. Light flooded the kitchen. For roughly a tenth of a second, there was silence. The cheap, microscopic photo sensors required a fraction of a moment to register the sudden influx of photons from the halogen fridge bulb. Then hell broke loose. It didn't sound like music. It sounded like a digital riot. 29 tiny, blown-out speakers activated simultaneously, unleashing a terrifying, overlapping cacophony of 8-bit chiptune nightmares. Because the sensors triggered at slightly different fractions of a second, none of the songs were synchronized. 3 different tempos of Old MacDonald clashed violently against a screeching, off-key rendition of Fur Elise, which was being drowned out by 5 overlapping, staggered loops of It's a Small World. The sheer volume of the combined shrill frequencies was physical, rattling the quiet atmosphere of the apartment like sonic shrapnel. It was a chaotic, electronic rave of the damned. Over the deafening, shrieking chorus of the plastic animals, I heard a sharp, panicked yelp. It was a guttural sound of pure, unadulterated shock, the kind of noise a human makes when their brain completely bypasses rational thought and goes straight into survival mode. This was immediately followed by the loud, sharp crash of ceramic shattering against the linoleum floor. He had dropped the leftover plate of pasta he had presumably just picked up. Less than a second later, the heavy metal door of the refrigerator was slammed shut with such violent, concussive force that I felt the vibration through the floorboards in my bedroom. The absolute darkness returned. The light sensors lost their stimulus. The shrieking 8-bit orchestra abruptly cut off, plunging the apartment back into a ringing, deafening silence. I sat in the dark, my hand pressed over my mouth to stifle the laughter shaking my chest. I heard Thatcher breathing heavily in the kitchen, his lungs pulling in ragged, panicked gasps of air. He didn't move for a long time. I could picture him standing there in the pitch black, surrounded by the remnants of shattered ceramic and cold spaghetti, questioning his own sanity, wondering if he had just triggered a booby trap set by a deranged clown. Eventually, I heard the soft, hurried crunch of his socks stepping over the broken plate. He retreated down the hallway, moving much faster than before. His bedroom door clicked shut and the lock turned. He didn't come out for the rest of the night. I woke up the next morning and walked into the kitchen. The broken plate and the scattered pasta had been swept up and deposited into the trash can. The floor had been wiped clean. I walked over to the refrigerator. The heavy metal door was shut tight, the magnetic seal perfectly, flawlessly engaged. Thatcher and I never spoke about that night. We never discussed the horrific sound that had echoed through the apartment. We never talked about the fact that the inside of our refrigerator now looked like a neon, plastic jungle. I simply left the magnets exactly where they were, a silent, colorful threat lurking in the cold air. He still gets up at 2 in the morning. He still wanders into the kitchen, driven by the biological urge for terrible late-night snacks. But now, when he opens that door, he does it with a deep, reverent caution. He knows he has exactly 3 seconds of grace before the photo sensors register the light and the electronic screeching begins. He grabs his string cheese with the precision and speed of a tactical operative. And most importantly, when he is done, he pushes that heavy metal door shut with a firm, deliberate force. Sometimes I hear him lean his entire body weight against it, just to be absolutely certain the seal is tight. It cost me $12.40, including overseas shipping. It was, without question, the greatest financial investment I have ever made. Sometimes, peaceful coexistence in a shared living space isn't about compromise or open communication. Sometimes people are simply immune to logic and reason. In those moments, you have to bypass the conversation entirely. You have to speak the only language the careless truly understand: sudden, chaotic, and overwhelming consequence. If someone refuses to respect your boundaries, don't waste your breath arguing. Just figure out what their breaking point is and buy it in bulk. If you enjoyed this story of auditory warfare and roommate justice, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below and let me know the most creative way you've ever handled a terrible roommate. Until next time, keep your boundaries firm and your fridge doors firmly shut.